All right, and we are live. Welcome back to another week of the Endless Report. This is episode 12. I'm your host, Tony. Unfortunately, Ben couldn't be with us today. We have some business going on here at Endless Studios, have some work to do. So just me today on the solo stream. But we're going to get through a lot of news this week. We had the PlayStation State of Play showcase last night, of course. So a lot of game announcements there. We're going to get into that right off the bat here. But before we start with that, I want to talk about some other things that happened earlier in the week. So we're going to start off with something that we actually kicked off last show talking about and actually ended our last show on. So last show you might remember we talked about Star Wars Jedi Survivor. This game was kind of hyped up for a while here. We thought it was coming a little earlier last month. It didn't, but then the next prediction was Star Wars Fan Fest, and of course that's when it was revealed. So we have some coverage here from IGN. I'm going to put this trailer on if you could see that in the background. So basically, this game takes place right off after the last Star Wars Jedi game. We're not sure exactly what's going to take Cal Kestis on his journey this time, but we do know it is around the same era of the current Obi-Wan Kenobi series. So I haven't watched this week's episode of Obi-Wan Kenobi yet, but I'm curious to see if maybe there'll be some tie-ins or maybe some hints because we have the Inquisitors kind of being part of both shows here. So I'm curious to see what's going to happen with this game. But as you can see, we have the trailer here looking really good. I believe this is an all next gen title, which is pretty exciting. There's no news on any last gen ports, whether PS4 or Xbox One being involved here, but we do see some more shots of the famous Cal Kestis lightsaber. Again, kind of bringing that more into the mainstream. That lightsaber actually is being sold now at the Disney World resort stores. So you can see a lot of brand integration coming here. I see a lot of new era for Star Wars in this game, and I'm really excited to see what comes out of this title. But jumping out of that, we actually have more Star Wars news this week. So bear with me as I pull this up here. So actually, in Nintendo Switch news, jumping to that, we have a new trailer for Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2. So if you remember a few weeks back on the show, we covered the Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic remake that was announced for PlayStation 5 a little earlier last year, and we're really excited for that here. And we also got Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, the original game, ported over to the Nintendo Switch around that time as well with some nice content. So it was really cool to see that in preparation for the game being remade next year. After that, we also now have Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2 here being announced again as well with restored content. So if you're not aware of what happened with this game a long time ago now, probably over 15 years ago now, where this game originally launched on PC without some of the content that happened during development, I'm not exactly sure what went down there or why things were cut, but this game's releasing now on the Switch in 2022 with all of that restored content. So it's going to be really cool for fans of this series, fans of the franchise that maybe missed out on that the first time to get to come back and play this portable with all that restored content DLC, as you can see on the screen now. So that's pretty exciting as well. We're not sure exactly what that entails, but I believe the game is going to be $15 USD. Yep, that's correct, which is a very nice price for that on Switch. And I believe that's coming out later this year, so it's something to really be looking forward to there. But we're going to continue moving on today. We have a lot of news to cover, so I'm going to try to speed through this as quickly as I can. But as I transition here to our next story, we have Sonic Frontiers. So Sonic has been in the mainstream a lot recently, actually. Well, the new Sonic films as well, but Sonic is back in gaming as well. So kind of reminiscent of, I believe, the 2009 Sonic open world game. We're kind of going back to an open world format with Sonic, so no 2D side scrolling action here. We're going full on kind of Zelda Breath of the Wild style here, where we have you kind of see some cinematics here, but they'll get into some gameplay on this IGN first demo that they came out with this month. But I'll speed through this a little bit so we could see some of that. But yeah, you could see these large open vistas, very different kind of feel for the recent games of the Sonic series, but I'm curious to see how this is going to play out. It looks pretty cool. It looks really fun with the dashing and speeding mechanics. Of course, Sonic is the blue blur. He's very fast, and we're curious to see how that's going to play out in this crazy open world type environment. I think they'll show here in a few moments that you can zip across, jump up walls, zip across wires, and it looks like a really exciting open world type of game. We don't get to see a lot of open worlds like this where you have a player character that can really zip around the environment like that. One thing that comes to mind is Spider-Man or a game like that where you kind of have, infamous games where you have superpowers, you can kind of zip around in that kind of fashion. And we'll talk about that more later in the show, actually. But yeah, Sonic Frontiers, not much more else we know about that at the moment. That is probably coming out 2023, I believe. I'm not sure we have a release date on that yet, but we do have this first look at gameplay for thank you to IGN first this month. So pretty cool there. We're going to move on to some interesting news here. Unfortunately, I'm not if you haven't heard, John Madden recently passed away earlier this year, and it leaves along a whole large legacy, not just in the world of football, but in the world of video games as well, with, of course, the Madden football series being such a prominent franchise over the last 20, 30 years, really. So Madden 23 has announced that they're actually, instead of having a cover athlete this year like they usually do, it's going to be the all Madden edition, and they're going to pay tribute to John Madden by having him on the cover, as well as kind of giving him little extra coverage in this year's game. So you could see, as last year, I believe it was two athletes, Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes, if I'm not mistaken, kind of took up that dual quarterback mantle on last game's cover. But this year we're bringing it back to kind of honor John Madden and his legacy. And I believe that this game will be launching later this year, and have that John Madden mantle in front of all the covers. So I believe John Madden football launched today on June 1st in 1988. So that's 2 days ago. So that's an anniversary is why they released this news this week, and it's I think it's a very nice tribute to the late John Madden, and a really nice way to do that by kind of keeping that Madden tradition of having the star of the year on the cover. And it's unfortunate that John Madden has passed, but it's really nice way to honor him, I think, in this way by putting him on the cover. But again, we're kind of zipping through the news today. We actually have one last story before we get into that PlayStation conference, and that is Summer Game Fest. So, speaking of that PlayStation conference, it was actually announced that Summer Game Fest has revealed its partner list for the summer, and that includes PlayStation, Xbox, and the like. So, I'm going to scroll down here so we can get a better view of that. Maybe I can zoom in here for the tweet from Jeff Keighley. So Jeff Keighley, if you know, hosts Summer Game Fest, and it's kind of taking the place of E3 this year. So usually we've had the Electronic Entertainment Expo every summer for a very long time now, and as we've seen in the past few years, of course, E3 has slowly kind of been, unfortunately, dying out. It's tried to adapt to some online formats. Again, then we had PlayStation, Xbox, Nintendo, and the like come out with all of their own kind of personal online showcases, kind of branching away from the traditional conference structure. So unfortunately, this year E3 is no more. We're not getting any official E3 conference this year, anything like that, online or otherwise. Unfortunately, so we're kind of seeing, as this transition goes after COVID, that we're getting, Summer Games Fest is kind of filling that void there. We had Summer Games Fest play in after the kind of the Link to the Game Awards that Jeff Keighley hosts as well in the past few years, and now we've been kind of taking over that summer spot as the primary summer showcase. So again, as I pulled up these companies here, we could see a lot of prominent brands: 2K, Activision, EA, Devolver, Square Enix, Sega, PlayStation, Xbox, of course, as I said, Steam, Netflix, even Warner Brothers, Skybound, Tribeca Film Festival. I mean, I could just keep reading pretty much every name on that list, and it may be a recognizable brand. Epic Games, of course. It's very exciting to see that all of these partners are embracing this kind of structured one lane showcase like this. So although we don't have E3 to kind of fill that summer showcase, hype that comes with all of that, we do have Summer Game Fest kind of filling in that void there, as I said earlier, and kind of having this cohesive structure for all the game companies to come together and celebrate in the summer like they usually do. So there was a little concern this year with the solo shows. I mean, we've had the same concerns throughout COVID the past few years, really, but when is PlayStation going to have a showcase? When is Xbox going to do theirs? Of course, we have Xboxes coming up on the 12th, which is now officially part of this Summer Game Fest, that we're going to have that main showcase on the 9th. So a lot of announcements coming, a lot of announcements I'll probably have next week on the Endless Report. Hopefully Ben's back, and I would love to talk about all those announcements and maybe some of the more PlayStation Center ones that we had this week as well that he didn't get to speak on. But yeah, a lot of exciting stuff coming up. Again, we started with PlayStation last night, so that's what I'm about to jump into now. But yeah, a lot of interesting things to have there, and Summer Games Fest seems to be filled with all of the company's games news. So again, the PlayStation showcase last night, which I'll get into now, was still third-party focused. A little bit of a PSVR as well, which we'll start off with as they did in the show. But we're still waiting on that main first-party PlayStation showcase later in the summer, which I'm assuming will be part of this schedule as well, which is great to hear. But bear with me now as I transition here. I'm going to pull up our next article, rather. So kind of skipping over here, I'm actually going to pull up some trailers from that showcase last night. So we're going to start off here with Resident Evil 4. This was something that surprised me a bit. We've heard about this in the past, this remake of Resident Evil 4 for next-gen systems, but it's kind of a really badly kept secret that kind of everybody forgot about. I feel like it was a year or two ago we first heard this rumor. It was kind of thrown to the wayside. Other Resident Evil projects being talked about. There were talks about Resident Evil and VR as well, again, with Resident Evil Village doing similar things with the first PSVR. So now we have Resident Evil 4 Remake coming fully to PS5, fully remade, I believe in Unreal Engine 5, if I'm not mistaken. But I can skip through this trailer here a bit. If you're a Resident Evil fan, you probably recognize that font at the beginning, which a lot of people went crazy over. the classic Resident Evil 4 font there with a date. So you get a date right off the bat there, March 2023. Very exciting. Again, early 2023 is very action packed right now with all the delays of 2022. It's another game in that spring 2023 window. So a lot going on there. But as you can see, updated graphics here. Again, I unfortunately actually haven't played Resident Evil 4 myself. So this is something kind of exciting to me for maybe to get into the franchise a little bit more than I have in the past. I was never a big horror game player in my past. I was never a big horror guy, but I've been getting more and more into more of these thriller horror type games. And Resident Evil 4, of course, I know is a classic. I know people have played it on many platforms and many versions. I believe there was a Resident Evil 4 VR version even before this, through Steam or something of the like. So this is coming to PS5 as well as announced with PSVR 2 features. So we don't know exactly what that's going to look like yet, but I'm assuming in line with the other games, it's going to be a full-on VR experience. So that's very exciting as well for fans of the Resident Evil franchise. But moving on and staying in line of Resident Evil, I'm actually going to jump real quick to another tab here because the last Resident Evil game, Resident Evil 7, as well, Resident Evil Village 8 rather, is coming to PSVR 2 as well. So we're getting a full PSVR 2 version of this game. As you can see here, that head bobbling movement a little bit, that's going to be all on your headset viewing that. So if you're a fan of horror experiences, especially in VR, I'm sure this is going to be a pretty frightening experience. I was lucky enough to play the demo of this game back when Resident Evil Village was launching, but I have not played this game myself. So I know there's a lot of frights, a lot of crazy stuff going on in this game, and that'll be pretty interesting in VR with all the action and the weaponry and stuff like that as you're seeing in this trailer. But we're going to keep moving on because we have a lot of games from the show to cover. Again, I may not be able to cover all the games showed last night, but I want to start here with PlayStation VR and get a good coverage on all of these PSVR titles because I think it's very interesting to see PSVR still launching this fall. Again, no delays on that so far whatsoever, but not a lot of news about it until this conference. So we're getting 4 PSVR games here right off the bat that I want to showcase here in the show as well. So if you've known about the Walking Dead VR game that's been out for the past few years, Walking Dead Saints and Sinners, this is an expansion for PSVR 2 that was announced here last night as well. And I believe this is called Walking Dead Saints and Sinners Retribution. This was actually the first title I saw when I tuned into the show last night. I was a little bit late and I had to rewind, but I saw the phrase Retribution in red, and I thought Red Dead Redemption, Red Dead Redemption, Red Dead, maybe a new Red Dead game from that series. But unfortunately, yeah, we're not holding out any hope for any Rockstar Red Dead announcements probably in the near future. We'll see what goes on with the Grand Theft Auto franchise and the like. But with the third-party announcement, that was the first kind of thought I had there with that logo. But as you can see here, it looks like a lot of action-packed zombie gameplay, as you'd expect from the Walking Dead franchise here. You see these hordes of zombies, these guns, you see all this action here. So going to be really interesting to see how that is in VR. Again, we have the PlayStation VR 2 Sense controllers that were announced earlier this year. So you're going to have one in each hand there. Again, like a typical VR experience, but there's a lot of interesting features that come with PSVR 2. Again, we have finger tracking, we have eye tracking, we have a lot of good graphical improvements over the PSVR 1. So I'm very curious to see how they handle that in this next game and how they update from the original Walking Dead VR experience. But moving on, we have one last PSVR 2 experience actually, which is very intriguing to me. I haven't played the Horizon series yet, but we have had this Horizon VR experience announced earlier in the year. But I'm going to pull that up here as well so we can have that. But as you can see, Horizon Forbidden West is getting its own kind of VR expansion. Not really, constrained to the original game. This is really more of its own standalone Horizon experience here. But as we're seeing here, we're getting that first-person perspective, of course, that comes with the VR. We're getting a lot of typical hallmarks of the Horizon series. When we have these robotic dinosaur creatures, you have all of the main. I'm not sure if this is the Nora tribe, the main tribe in the game, or if we're seeing another faction here. But we're getting a different character. It is not Aloy, the main character of the main game. It is another character, I believe, named Reyes that we heard in the trailer here. And as you're seeing, we have this hand tracking movement here. You see the hand there in the VR move away some branches, which is very interesting for a VR game, that kind of level of interactivity. So I'm curious to see how maybe they use this game as maybe a showcase for PSVR 2. This is a first-party PSVR 2 title. I'm curious to see how this game probably emphasizes the features of the PSVR 2 at launch. You see some bow and arrow gameplay here, very cool. And we see a lot of combat sequences, even some action sequences. So I'm curious to see how that's going to play out. Again, looks really exciting. Graphics look very nice for a VR game. It looks very intriguing, new addition to the Horizon franchise. And with this, we actually got an announcement as well, very briefly during the showcase, that Horizon Forbidden West, which launched earlier this year, as you may know, is getting a full-on update with New Game Plus, some upgrades to the overall gameplay experience, and kind of bringing that a new more like kind of what's the word there? Kind of accessibility update, basically giving a lot of new features to kind of make the game a little easier to get into and a little easier to manage in terms of some of the smaller features. But yeah, a big update there for Horizon. Curious to see how that's going to work on PSVR 2. Again, we got some kind of frightening first person action there in PSVR. And then we had some further commentary here, as you could see from the dev team, but very cool. We're going to continue the transition here into more PlayStation content. Again, this showcase was action packed with a lot of new game announcements that, again, we expected some of these VR announcements, but not all of them. We have one last VR announcement actually that I want to show here. And that is a game that has been out for a while. We've talked about a lot on the Endless Report actually as well. So I'll pull this up here, and is no other than No Man's Sky. So again, we've talked about this game quite a lot on the Endless Report, about especially when we talk about game launches that weren't necessarily the best game launches, but then came around in the next few years to becoming really great game experiences that had a lot of community support. And No Man's Sky is definitely probably one of the greatest examples of a game after launch really coming back in full fashion and becoming a real powerhouse of a game. So we can see here we have first person VR gameplay from No Man's Sky VR, which was announced last night. And apologies here, let me make that full screen so you can see that a little bit better. But as you can see, we have spacefaring gameplay here. We have flying spaceships. We have ground combat, as you saw earlier. Very cool addition to PSVR. Not one I was necessarily expecting, but I think any game that can have that kind of experience is a really, a cockpit, being in a spaceship like that is really cool in VR. I mean, we're curious to see if anything else, kind of like, I know Microsoft Flight Simulator, something Xbox has that PlayStation doesn't necessarily have, kind of a sim flying game to really match up to that. But I feel like any sim racing game, I'm surprised we didn't see Gran Turismo here tonight. Maybe we'll see that later in the year, but I'd be shocked if we didn't get a Gran Turismo racing experience like that in VR. I think that'd be very cool and exciting as well. But No Man's Sky, really awesome. I think the idea of being able to take off in a spaceship and fly and go into warp speed, that Star Wars light speed effect that we all love. I think that'd be really cool to do in VR. I feel like you're on the sticks there flying a real ship. I think it's a really cool natural evolution for a franchise to move into virtual reality. So very excited for that one as well. Curious to see what else we get from PSVR 2. Again, that was the last of the PSVR 2 games we got last night, but I'm curious to see what else is announced later this year, whether we get pricing, whether we get any more specifications, any more third-party announcements. I'm sure we're going to get some more. Again, there was a rumor earlier this week. I actually, not sure we covered this on the report last week. This was earlier this week that Modern Warfare 2, which we had covered on last week's report, may be getting a PlayStation VR 2 mode. Again, this is all conjecture here. This is all rumors. But similar to how 2019's Modern Warfare game had some in-depth campaign missions where you really had the feel of a special operative and kind of going door to door and that really intense kind of visceral experience. There's rumors that kind of experience could be made into a PSVR 2 experience. Again, using the word experience a lot here. That's kind of the word that they like to use with VR instead of game, because a lot of VR games tend to be a little smaller than the average normal game. But I do think they could have a real opportunity here to make a full-on VR support for that game. Again, I don't imagine traditional Call of Duty multiplayer being in that fashion, but I do imagine maybe a single player kind of operative mode where you have your night vision goggles on and you have the headset on and you can kind of feel like you're really in that moment. I think that could be really thrilling for fans of the military genre, but I'm curious to see how that plays out. On the other third party game I wanted to mention that a lot of people talk about when they think of PSVR 2 is, of course, Half-Life Alyx, probably the most popular VR game in general at the moment, coming from Valve, of course. So I'm curious to see if maybe PlayStation would be open to partnering with a lot of these high-profile, PC type games. We've already seen some PC level games being announced for PSVR in the past, that weren't originally a PlayStation, IP, you would say. So I'm curious to see what the PC support and what the third-party support will be for existing VR IP when it comes to the PSVR 2. But again, I'm sure we'll hear more about that later in the year. So we're going to move on here. Something that was very unexpected, oddly enough, for something that we did talk about last week in the report as well. We talked about our predictions, but this one kind of came out of left field for me. I thought it was pretty surprising. So we did talk about last week how PlayStation announced that they were expecting at least $300 million in profit from the PC marketing space this fall. So again, we had God of War launch on PC, we had Horizon, we had the Uncharted series, big for PlayStation. You would think, what else could really launch on PC besides maybe Spider-Man, a property like that would really rake in that much money. Maybe The Last of Us, again, maybe another PlayStation IP, but yet again, something I did not expect. Spider-Man is coming to PC this fall. I believe August 22nd is the date. So while again, I said in the report many times, I'm anticipating Spider-Man 2 in 2023 or next year, probably one of my most anticipated games in the moment. It's really exciting to see the first game in this remastered format like that in all its glory come to PC. And of course, with that PC release comes mods, comes all of the PC support and probably the graphical improvements and all of the quality of life improvements you'd probably expect from a PC release. So really exciting. Again, it's, if you have a PC that's probably even more powerful than a PlayStation, it'd be really exciting to see what you could pull off with this game, whether it's, gameplay improvements, you could have pretty much every Spider-Man suit, if you're a Spider-Man fan, you could expect from the comic books and the movies and so forth that will be modded in by fans. So a really cool announcement from PlayStation. Not something I expected to be released on PC. Out of all the properties I think they'd keep exclusive, I can't think of a single more high profile, higher expectation for profit type franchise than a character like Spider-Man. So it really is something to see that game, which a lot of people probably didn't get to enjoy it being exclusive, come to PC and be on a more open platform like that. So really excited for everyone who hasn't played this game or this franchise to get into it. One of my favorite games the last few years, obviously, the way I talk about it on the show, but one of my favorite characters as well. So really excited to see that come to PC with all the modding and all the things that come with that in all its glory. So yeah, another really exciting game to look forward to. But bear with me as I move on to our next title here. We have a few more titles announced last night. I know a lot of new titles announced. This one's actually something we've known about for a while, but we finally get a release date on, and a game I'm very excited to see myself. So this is a game called Stray. We have talked about this earlier on the show. It's actually a feline player controller. So you're playing as a cat in a post-apocalyptic world, it seems, where it's fully inhabited by robots. So again, I'm not too sure what the story of the atmosphere of this universe is. I actually don't really want to know too much because I'm very intrigued by this game just from seeing all this footage here, and I'll have this playing up on screen as you can see. But again, I really like the idea of a player controller that's a little abnormal to what we're used to. Again, we don't really see a lot of four-legged player controllers. We talked about before on some of our early endless streams, if you've been with us for a while, about Feisty Ferrets, a game we've had where we have a ferret player controller, which is very fun and really exciting to play as well. It's just a different experience that you don't get from a lot of third-person action games. So to have a kind of game here, as you can see, you're kind of roaming around this world, learning more details about what's going on around you, what your surroundings are. Again, you can see this kind of neo-futuristic kind of cyberpunk aesthetic here they got going. I really think it's very cool. You have these robot enemies kind of looking for you, and you're this cat kind of scurrying through this urban landscape trying to, I guess, figure out what's going on, how you're going to get out of here, how you're going to survive this environment. Again, I don't know too much about the details of this universe. It's a brand new IP, but it's very exciting, and just from the visuals here, I'm very excited to play. And that is actually coming out July 19th. So we're going to get that game in about a month, which is pretty exciting to see. There were rumors it was going to be this summer. There were really no hints at that being announced anytime soon. So people were really looking to see this game at this state of play, and happily enough, it was there, and it is coming very soon. So that's pretty exciting for all the fans of that game. Again, I've been looking forward to that myself as well. So I'm curious to see how that game turns out. And we have a few more announcements here. Again, I'm not sure we're going to get to every single game announced in the conference today, but I will make sure to touch on each of them so we get some honorable mentions here and we don't forget anything. But something we also talked about previously. So again, a lot of these predictions coming to fruition, things we've heard about before. The Callisto Protocol. We talked about this maybe last week or maybe the week before, but comes from the former creator of Dead Space. So if you're fan of the Dead Space franchise, you're probably aware that EA has been remaking the original Dead Space, and that is coming out of January 2023. So probably not unbeknownst to them, the original creator has been making his own kind of spiritual successor with this new franchise, the Callisto Protocol, which I'm showing the trailer here in the background. And as I said before, Resident Evil, I'm not traditionally a horror game player. I'm definitely into action games and things of the like, but I haven't played Dead Space myself, and Dead Space Remake was something I was very much looking forward to. So to now see this game, which is coming from the original creator of Dead Space, again, like I said, with a new vision, with these incredible visuals here, the gameplay looks really visceral and intense, really gripping here. I'm curious to see how this is going to go down, because I think it's kind of an interesting situation. Speaking to my friend of mine earlier after the conference yesterday about how these games are both going to be launching in a really tight window. I believe this game's coming out in March or February of 2023 as well. So you have Dead Space in January, and then again, the Dead Space kind of spiritual successor here, very similar kind of vibes there from these two games coming out in a really tight window. So it's kind of interesting to see EA kind of go, kind of market against a very similar IP from the one that the original creator had departed from them. And again, this is coming December 2nd, 2022. I'm mistaken there. So right at the end of the year, and then you get a few weeks later, you get that Dead Space remake. So pretty interesting there. Curious to see how those two games launching together are going to play around each other. I'm sure there's enough room for both of those to breathe a little bit, but again, very similar games. One of them is a new IP, which doesn't really have a lot of history behind it to prove it, other than the fact that again, it was created by the Dead Space original creator. So curious to see more of that game. Again, it looks really exciting, as does the Dead Space remake. So kind of interesting situation there, where you kind of have both of those, very similar titles in a similar window. But again, curious to see how that turns out. But we're gonna keep moving on with an indie game here. Actually, the one that I was really intrigued by yesterday. I think it was kind of fun, action looking, really cool game. This one's called Roller Drome. So I'm gonna pull this up here and play this trailer in the background for a moment. But this is actually kind of a roller derby esque type title, where you're playing in a futuristic world. I believe it's the 2030s, and there's a new blood sport where you're playing kind of a roller derby fight action game with guns and weapons and stuff. So a little chaotic, a little crazy, but you kind of see these kind of Max Payne esque like slow mo jumping moves here. You can see these flips. So very cool gameplay wise. It looks pretty exciting. I love this wall running type aspect with the rollerblading and the speed of this action here. So pretty cool. It's, again, another really interesting player controller. One game where just having this basic concept of this kind of, player on skates like this with this kind of gameplay action combined with that almost Tony Hawk skateboarding flips you see here off those ramps. It's a very cool combination of action gameplay with skateboarding type gameplay that I've really liked from a lot of other series in the past. So I think we talked about Skate on the show as well. That game has been in development, coming back as well. Again, we had the Tony Hawk series remake of 1 and 2 about 2 years ago now. So skating games are kind of back in the public domain here. I'm not sure what the inspiration behind Roller Drome itself was, but I really do like the look of that game. Looks like good fun. I believe it's coming to PlayStation in a month or so. So look forward for that game. Absolutely. Another really cool little announcement there in the conference. Moving on, I believe we have another indie game, and then we're gonna end off on one more announcement. But this was a game that we've seen a few times now, actually, this game called Season. So we've seen this for about a year now. This is a game that's an indie title, basically talking about an adventurer who's going across this world. We're not sure if this is our Earth or, another universe, but kind of going around and collecting thoughts and recordings and interviews from people around this world. And it kind of touches on themes of memory, of history, of ever-changing times, and what is preserved, once the seasons change, what is left? And I think that's kind of the main thematic question this game's going for here. I really love the art style. I really love the themes it's going after. This is one of those games that really looks like it's going to be a really impressive, artful, thought-provoking experience. It's something I've been really looking forward to. You can see some footage here of the player recording some sounds and kind of being kind of this cartographer, if you will, this historian, kind of going across this land here and taking remnants and pieces of information. So it's a very interesting concept. I really love this art style here. There's an emphasis on the characters and the people you meet along the journey. So I'm curious to see how those characters are. And again, it looks like it's really a really interesting human story. And I'm really curious and excited to see how this game's going to turn out. But yeah, another great indie announcement there. I'm going to skip through here. I'm not sure if we got a release date on this game. I believe we just got the title once again. So I'm curious to see, autumn 2022. There we go. So no release date there, but we are getting that later this year. So again, pretty exciting. I'm happy to see that game finally come out and come to fruition. It's a game we've seen at a few PlayStation showcases, I believe now, but one that I've always been intrigued by. So again, we have one more large announcement from the PlayStation show here, but I want to give some kind of like honorable mentions here because we're running out of time. But Street Fighter 6 was something that was shown once again, and actually got some gameplay with more of a hub mode. So something we're not really used to seeing in Street Fighter. It was the player character rather, being able to run around in kind of an adventure area with different activities and different merchants and things like that. So kind of similar to a hub area. Think of like Destiny or a game like that, where you kind of have all of your main events going on, which is great. But other than that, some great Street Fighter gameplay as well, as you'd expect from that franchise. Really looks good. The graphics look great. The gameplay looks great. Again, I'm not a huge fighting gamer, so I'm sure that those are die hard into fighting games and the competition aspect. We're really going to dive into all the nitty gritty details of what's going on there with the new moves and the character sets and all that. But from what I saw, I think it looks really exciting. I think it looks great. Really excited to see how that game turns out. One other indie game I wanted to mention was Tunic. Another game that's a kind of a isometric action game with you're playing as a fox as the player character. It's a game probably a lot of us have seen a few times. Again, that game is coming out, I believe, later this year, so really excited to see that game as well. And also Eternites was a game that was inspired by the Persona series, I believe, and was an action adventure combat game, which also is a dating simulator in one. So that's an interesting kind of combination of genres there. Curious to see how that game turns out as well. But I believe that was also an indie developer who was inspired by the Persona series, very popular on the PlayStation platform as well. And they made that game kind of in inspiration of that. But one last game that was announced last night, which I'd like to touch on here, was Final Fantasy 16. So I'm going to pull that up here. Give me 1 second here and show that trailer in the background. But yeah, another game that a lot of fans have been clamoring for since it's been shown at this PlayStation Showcase, I believe last summer, if I'm not mistaken. So again, we're getting a lot of kind of like Western medieval motifs in this Final Fantasy. You see a lot of this kind of regal kings and kingdom kind of storyline here. Again, I'm not particularly aware of exactly how this Final Fantasy story will go. I'm not a big Final Fantasy player myself. Again, this is one of slight blind spot I have where I haven't played a ton of the Final Fantasy games, but I do know how each game is a different storyline sometimes and not are always connected to the past Final Fantasy. So I believe this is a completely new storyline, completely new characters, but you see a lot of almost kind of Lord of the Rings kind of almost combat sequence there and some of those cinematics of these large scale battles. You see these large kingdoms fighting. So it's a very interesting kind of medieval theme going for this Final Fantasy game. I know fans are probably very excited about this. Again, I'm very curious to see how this game turns out. But this is something fans have been clamoring for a long time. Again, you actually get some gameplay here in this trailer, which I'm sure is very exciting for fans of the series who want to see that gameplay more in depth, of course. You're seeing a lot of cinematics here as well and some boss battles. But if I fast forward a little bit through here towards the end, you can see some more cinematics. Again, they're getting all into the story here. Looks really great graphically. Absolutely. So again, another really exciting title at the end of the show there to wrap it off. Final Fantasy, something a lot of fans have been clamoring for a long time. And that's about it for the third-party offerings. Again, we had at the PlayStation Showcase last night. Again, the primary PlayStation Showcase with all of their first-party titles. I'm barring Spider-Man, I guess you could say. But I believe they're working with a third-party studio there to port that to PC, and that's why that kind of counts here. But we're going to see some more first party, hopefully some maybe more announcements surrounding Spider-Man, God of War, of course, which is still, again, like we said last week, coming this fall as far as we know. So again, we're kind of waiting on the rest of PlayStation's announcements there when it comes to all of that. But that being said, they had a pretty action-packed show last night, as we said earlier, and a lot going on with the Summer Games Fest later this week. So I believe on June 9th is when we have our Summer Game Fest main show. Again, we're not sure exactly what's going to be shown there. That could be anything from really any third party, maybe even a first party PlayStation, Xbox, or Nintendo game. Not sure Nintendo was on that list of partners there that we showed earlier. So probably going to do one of their direct, Nintendo Direct type approaches again this summer. I believe we had a Nintendo Indie Direct a few weeks back. We probably briefly covered on the show but we're going to see probably a main Nintendo showcase later in the summer as well. But of course, early summer, you never really know how these things are going to go each year. We're curious to see, especially, in these COVID times, how each company kind of plans out their summer lineup here. So again, if I had to give a prediction, I'm thinking maybe we got a July or August PlayStation date to kind of come back up after these June showcases we're going to get here from Xbox and the general Summer Game Fest. But who knows? Again, the Sony is pretty good at being a little unpredictable here. Maybe we get a showcase. Maybe we get a God of War primary showcase for that game's launch. And then maybe later this year, September type, 2023 hype up showcase. So they can really go any way they want to here. But again, with that partnership to Summer Game Fest, it makes me think they're going to have some constraints there. Again, this show this week that we just covered today was part of the Summer Game Fest. So that could be the extent of it. They could just have their one little, showcase here to throw them a bone and then do their own kind of big, primary PlayStation event without any outside influence. But again, who knows? They're kind of a wild card when it comes to those kind of things. But I'm curious to see what they do. But I am excited for Xbox. Again, we have Xbox on June 12th. So like I said, Summer Game Fest June 9th. Xbox also part of that June 12th. And we're probably going to get some more news on, again, the aforementioned Starfield and Redfall games we mentioned a few times on earlier shows back when those got delayed a few weeks earlier, which was a bit disappointing. Unfortunately, we're really looking forward to those later this year in fall of 2022. But again, like I said earlier, with some of those announcements that we talked about in this PlayStation Showcase, we're getting a lot in early 2023. So kind of one of those things like we talked about with Horizon earlier, getting that update where, besides Elden Ring being the game that kind of overshadowed everything this February when that came out, we're going to have a lot of games next February, January, March that are going to be all and kind of having their own place. Not to say that these aren't some large titles here, but something like Elden Ring was something that was so monumental and colossal that it kind of overshadowed everything else in the quarter there. But this quarter, I believe quarter 4 of 2022, you'd call it, this early part of 2023 is going to be full of a lot of different IPs. And again, like that Dead Space remake, maybe some similar IPs, but a lot of stuff going on in that 4 to 5 month period, maybe the end of 2022, early 2023. So a lot to look forward to there. Again, we're kind of having a slower show today. Again, it was just me today. So trying to run through this news as efficiently as I can, but that's about it. Again, I know I'm wrapping up here. Really looking forward to everything else that's upcoming, but it's been really cool to cover everything that happened last night and everything that happened this week. Again, kind of a lot up in the air here. We have a lot look forward to with those showcases. So next week, hopefully I'll have Ben back here to join me as we get to discuss all of those other game announcements that I'm sure are going to come in the next few days. So I'm looking forward to it. I hope you guys are as well. And I want to thank you again for joining another Endless Report. It's been great to do this one. Thank you as always for sticking with us on the Endless Studios. We have a lot more content coming. We have a lot more streams coming starting in a few weeks. So stay tuned for that. And thanks again. I'm going to end the show here. Have a good one.